Have you ever noticed how the more deeply you think, the harder it becomes to simply relax in someone's arms? How the very moment love feels close enough to touch, your mind wakes up like a guard who has been sleeping with one eye open. There is a strange ache that lives inside you, the ache of wanting to fall into someone completely, while another part of you keeps whispering that falling is just another word for losing your balance. You lie beside someone you care about, listening to their steady breathing, watching the way calm sits so effortlessly on their face, and yet your body stays tense, your heart beats too loudly, and your mind spirals into a quiet panic only you can hear. You replay the day, the words exchanged, the glances that lasted too long or felt too short. One unanswered message becomes a prophecy. One shift in tone becomes a warning. You wonder why you can't be like them, why you can't let silence be silence instead of a puzzle that needs decoding. It's not that you don't love deeply, it's that you feel deeply, think deeply, anticipate deeply. Your mind isn't trying to destroy your peace, it's trying to protect you from the kind of pain it remembers too well. You've always seen more than others, the small hesitations, the hidden meanings behind a smile, the unspoken tension in a room. People think that intelligence gives you control, but in love it often does the opposite. It makes you aware of every potential fracture, every invisible fault line where affection could eventually break. Most people experience love like warm water. You experience it like thin ice, beautiful but fragile, glowing but temporary. Others assume you are calm, collected, wise, the person who thinks things through. They don't see the part of you that analyzes every emotional shift, scanning for danger, the way a child watches the door after hearing their parents argue. And that's the truth hidden beneath your calm exterior. You're not cold, and you're not detached. You're simply too aware, too awake, too skilled at seeing the layers beneath what others call simple. Your mind has learned to predict storms before clouds even form, and emotional safety, the thing you crave most, starts to feel like a story you were never taught how to believe. But this struggle didn't begin in adulthood. The roots go far deeper than the relationships you've had or the people who disappointed you. To understand why love feels dangerous, why trust feels like a risk, and why your mind refuses to rest even in gentle arms, you have to return to the first place you ever tried to feel safe, your childhood. Have you ever wondered when you first stopped believing that love was something soft, something safe, something you could lean on without fear? It usually begins long before you have words for it in a small, quiet room of your childhood, where your mind learned to observe before it learned to play. You were the kind of child who noticed everything, even the things adults thought they were hiding. You sensed the tension in the house before you understood what arguments were. You heard the tremor in your mother's voice, even when she smiled. You saw the way your father's affection came in waves, warm one moment, distant the next, and you learned to measure love not by how it felt, but by how quickly it could disappear. So you became the silent observer, the mature one, the little therapist who tried to make sense of emotions far too big for your small hands. You studied every facial expression the way other children studied cartoons. You memorized tones of voice like other kids memorized rhymes. You learned to predict storms before the clouds even gathered. And without anyone teaching you, you understood that love was not a simple gift. It was a shifting landscape you had to navigate carefully, quietly, constantly. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where affection arrived when you performed well, behaved perfectly, or didn't burden anyone with your feelings. Or maybe you lived with someone whose moods were unpredictable, tender on Monday, terrifying on Tuesday, and you learned that safety was something you had to earn with silence. Or perhaps your emotional needs were simply unseen because you were the independent child, the one adults bragged about for not causing trouble, never realizing that your quietness was not confidence but fear. There were nights when you hid in your room, listening to muffled arguments through the walls, replaying them in your mind, wondering if you caused it. You lay awake trying to solve emotional puzzles that never belonged to you, and slowly your mind transformed into a machine built for scanning danger, decoding clues, preventing pain. You stopped trusting simple moments of warmth because warmth had an expiration date. Smiles could vanish, promises could bend, love could turn cold without warning. Deep thinking became your shield. Before it was a talent, it was a defense, a way to stay one step ahead of disappointment, to pre-grieve things before losing them, to hurt less by expecting less. You didn't become a deep thinker by accident. You became one by necessity, and though the house eventually changed and the walls stopped echoing with tension, one thing remained unchanged: the habit. That child grows up, but the vigilance grows with them, and now you're no longer decoding your parents. You're decoding every person who tries to love you. Have you noticed how easily you convince others that you're fine, even on the days when your mind is tearing itself apart? Somewhere along the line, that watchful child you once were grew into an adult who learned how to wear calmness like armor. You appear composed, logical, emotionally steady, the kind of person who seems above chaos, above drama, above being wounded. People admire your self-control. They mistake your silence for wisdom, your detachment for strength. They don't see the tension in your chest or the way you rehearse every word before you let it leave your mouth. They don't see the mask, because that's what it is, a mask. Smooth, polished, perfectly shaped to hide the trembling underneath. Behind it lives a shadow you rarely let anyone touch. A shadow that still craves a raw and unguarded kind of love. A shadow that remembers what it felt like to want comfort without conditions. But that part of you was exiled long ago, replaced by a version of yourself who learned it's safer to appear unbothered than to risk being seen too deeply. So you move through relationships with an invisible oxygen mask strapped to your heart. The moment someone gets too close, you pull away not because you don't care, but because closeness feels like a siren signaling danger. You become short in your replies, measured in your tone, calculated in your affection. You overthink every message you receive, yet you reply with the kind of emotional restraint that keeps the other person guessing. You feel the intensity of a connection, but you mock your own feelings before anyone else can. You push away the gentle ones because their kindness feels suspicious, unfamiliar, almost threatening. And yet you chase the emotionally distant ones, the ones who mirror the chaos you learned to navigate as a child. Your intelligence becomes your shield. You psychoanalyze your own emotions until they're sterilized, rationalized, drained of vulnerability. You intellectualize love to avoid drowning in it. You would rather understand why you feel something than actually feel it. Your mind creates theories where your heart only wanted tenderness. And here lies the paradox that haunts you. You long for a love that feels safe, honest, deep, but when it finally arrives, your nervous system doesn't recognize it. Safety feels boring. Stability feels suspicious. But emotional tension? That feels familiar, almost like home. Yet this isn't just the poetry of heartbreak. It's not just your imagination constructing elaborate defenses. There is a psychological and neurological pattern behind why deep thinkers struggle to feel safe in love, a pattern your mind has carried for years without ever naming. Have you ever wondered why something as gentle as love can make your whole body tense as if danger is approaching? It's strange how your mind can turn a soft moment into a battlefield, how a simple pause in someone's voice can feel like the opening note of abandonment. But this reaction isn't weakness, it's wiring. Long before you fell in love for the first time, your brain was already learning what closeness meant, what comfort felt like, and whether safety was something you deserved or something you had to earn. Attachment theory explains that when you grow up in an environment where affection is inconsistent or unpredictable, your nervous system develops its own language of survival. If love arrived in fragments, warm one day, cold the next, your brain adapted by becoming hyper-attuned to every emotional shift. If comfort came with conditions, you learned to stay small, stay quiet, stay useful. And if chaos was the rule, your mind became the watchtower, scanning for threats even in silence. Sensitive children especially develop these patterns more intensely because their brains absorb emotional signals like a sponge. As an adult, that sensitivity becomes what psychologists call an overactive default mode network, the part of the brain that spins stories when you're not fully engaged. For deep thinkers, this mode rarely turns off. You're always reflecting, simulating, predicting. It's incredible for creativity, for problem solving, for understanding the world. But in love, it becomes a double-edged sword. The same imagination that helps you understand complex ideas also helps you imagine rejection that hasn't happened, betrayal that doesn't exist, motives that were never there. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, starts firing at emotional shadows. A delayed text feels like danger. A moment of silence feels like withdrawal. A neutral expression feels like disappointment. Your body reacts as if it's trying to save you from a threat no one else can see. For some people, love is coded in the brain as comfort. For you, it's coded as risk. And then there are the cognitive biases that quietly tighten the knot. Confirmation bias makes you notice only the signs that support your deepest fear. I will be rejected. Negativity bias pulls your focus to what feels wrong rather than what is steady. Mind reading convinces you that you know what your partner thinks or feels without ever asking, and somehow your imagination always chooses the worst case scenario. Add in the perfectionism that so many deep thinkers carry, and suddenly love becomes a test you fear failing. If things aren't emotionally perfect, your mind whispers that something must be fundamentally broken. So you check messages twice, then 5 times. You replay conversations until they blur. You expect abandonment even when someone is trying their best to stay. You create distance through sarcasm or silence or pretending you don't care. Small acts of self-protection that slowly become self-harm. But the real tragedy isn't just in what your mind thinks. It's in how it quietly sabotages the very thing your heart has been yearning for all along. Have you ever felt the strange sensation of being both the prisoner and the guard of your own heart? As if there is a courtroom inside your mind where love is always on trial, questioned, cross-examined, and never fully acquitted. Even when someone shows you gentleness, your thoughts whisper objections. Even when someone reaches for you, something inside pulls away. And it's not because you don't want love, it's because your mind has learned to treat tenderness like a threat. You begin to notice how you sabotage the very thing you long for. Just when things start to get serious, you create distance. You become colder, quieter, more calculated. You tell yourself you're just thinking clearly, but really, you're bracing for a blow that hasn't happened. You analyze every detail like evidence, searching for the red flags you expect to find. The smallest flaw becomes a prophecy. The slightest uncertainty becomes an escape route. You leave first so you don't get left. You shut the door before anyone tries to walk through it. And then there are the people you choose, the ones who can't love you back in a steady way. You're drawn to their distance, their ambiguity, their chaos. Something about their emotional unavailability feels familiar, almost comforting, as if repeating an old story you already know the ending to is safer than risking a new one. You stand on the emotional bridge, ready to jump before anyone can push you. You keep your heart behind glass, visible but unreachable, like a museum piece protected from fingerprints. This is where the shadow, the Jungian shadow, steps in. It's the part of you that holds everything you've labelled as weakness, the longing, the vulnerability, the tenderness you were never allowed to show. You spend years trying to be rational, calm, controlled, and yet it's the shadow that writes your love stories. It's the shadow that chooses partners who confirm your old wounds. It's the shadow that whispers, "This is all you deserve." The more you exile it, the more power it gains, operating quietly in the places your self-awareness cannot bear to look. And here lies the painful paradox. You pride yourself on being self-aware, thoughtful, intelligent, yet the parts of you that drive your fear of love are the ones you avoid the most, the child who still doesn't feel safe, the teenager who learned to hide hurt behind logic, the adult who pretends they don't need what they secretly crave. This inner war doesn't happen in isolation. The world around you often rewards your armor and punishes your vulnerability, making the struggle even worse. Have you ever noticed how the world applauds you for the very traits that quietly suffocate you? How society praises your calmness, your independence, your logic, yet never asks how you learn to silence your own needs so effectively. You've grown up in a culture that worships the unbothered persona, the emotionally detached genius who floats above the chaos of feelings. Movies romanticize the character who can solve impossible problems but can't say, "I need you." Books turn emotional distance into mystery. And slowly, you begin to believe that this is strength, that being unreadable is admirable, that expressing fear or longing makes you weak. People love your mind. They admire your insight, your ability to analyze situations, your talent for staying composed when others fall apart. Friends come to you for relationship advice because you see things clearly. Colleagues rely on you because you're steady, reasonable, responsible. But beneath their praise is a painful truth. The world has taught you how to think, not how to feel. It has rewarded your self-sufficiency so often that you've forgotten what it's like to depend on someone without shame. No one taught you how to let yourself be held without feeling the urge to apologize for needing comfort. And then there's modern dating culture, a landscape of ghosting, half-effort affection, mixed signals, and constant options. Every delay, every silence, every change in tone becomes another micro-rejection that your mind files away as evidence. Evidence that confirms your deepest suspicion, that love is unpredictable, unstable, unsafe. When the world is full of games and disappearing acts, your overthinking doesn't feel irrational, it feels necessary. It feels like the only protection you have left. But beneath all of this lies a larger philosophical question. What if the world has defined strength incorrectly? What if emotional numbness is not courage, but starvation? What if your ability to detach, to seem unaffected, to carry everything alone is not a mark of resilience, but a sign of how deeply you were conditioned to neglect your own heart? You were taught to admire the warrior with the stone face, but no one talks about the cost of wearing armor for too long, how it fuses to the skin, how it becomes harder to take off even when the battle is over. On the outside, you look like the person who understands relationships better than anyone. On the inside, you're terrified of being fully known, because being known means being seen, and being seen means being vulnerable. You learn to perform stability so convincingly that even you forget it's a performance. And this leads to the quietest pain of all. What happens to the parts of you that still don't feel safe, even in the arms of someone who loves you? Have you ever felt completely alone while lying next to someone who swears they love you? It's a strange kind of heartbreak, Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet one that settles into your bones. The kind where your body is inches away from warmth, yet your mind stands miles away, behind invisible walls it built long before you understood what love truly meant. You want to reach out, to melt into the comfort beside you, but something holds you back. A hesitation, a fear, a whisper saying, "Don't trust this too quickly." And so you stay still, pretending to sleep, pretending to be calm, while inside you are fighting a war your partner doesn't even know you're in. There's a specific ache that grows in the chest of someone who analyzes everything. It's the ache of wondering why love feels heavy instead of soft, why safety feels suspicious instead of soothing. You wake up each morning with a subtle anxiety you can't name, a tightness in your stomach, a heaviness in your heart, a feeling of being unreachable even to yourself. Some days it feels like depression, other days like emotional numbness, and many days like a blend of both. You walk through life with the sense that people see only the surface of you, while the deeper layers stay locked away, misunderstood and untouched. You might find yourself holding back tears at moments when your heart wants to break open, but you swallow them because you learned early on that being strong means being composed. You watch other people fall in love with an ease that looks almost magical, laughing freely, trusting effortlessly, and you can't help but wonder what hidden flaw separates you from them. You start believing there's something wrong with you, that you are somehow harder to love, too complicated, too intense, too aware. And little by little, you turn that belief into an identity you carry like a shadow. This quiet loneliness doesn't just shape your emotions, it shapes your choices. You stay in half-fulfilling relationships because part of you fears that half is the most you'll ever be allowed. You overfunction in love, becoming the caretaker, the steady one, the therapist, while neglecting your own emotional hunger. You hold the pain of two people because you're afraid to let someone else hold even yours. And in trying so hard to be the strong, understanding partner, you forget that strength without softness becomes a cage. But here's the truth that your mind rarely lets you consider. What if your struggle isn't proof that you are too deep to be loved? What if the real issue is simply that no one ever taught your depth how to feel safe? And if that's true, then safety is not out of reach. It's something you can learn slowly, gently, one unguarded moment at a time. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stop running from the very thing you crave? To finally let your depth exist without treating it like a flaw that needs to be hidden behind logic and distance? Healing doesn't ask you to become less intelligent or less aware. It asks you to build a new relationship with the mind that once taught you to survive by overthinking. Your depth was never the enemy. It was simply a child who learned to stay alert because safety was inconsistent. Now, that depth is asking to be guided, not silenced. The first shift happens quietly in the moment you catch your mind spiraling, and instead of panicking, you pause and ask, is this a memory or reality? It's a simple question, but it interrupts the old pattern. Neuroscientists call this meta-awareness, the ability to observe your thoughts instead of drowning in them. With each pause, your brain learns something it was never taught, that not every silence is abandonment, not every delay is danger, not every warm moment is a trap waiting to spring. Your body has its own healing to do as well. Through grounding, breathing, and slow somatic practices, you teach your nervous system what calmness feels like without the cost of fear. You learn to exhale fully, to unclench your stomach, to sit with affection without bracing for loss. These small practices become a new language, one where safety is felt, not merely analysed. Then comes the most intimate part, learning to speak honestly instead of testing, withdrawing, or pretending you're unbothered. Saying, I feel scared without apologizing for it. Saying, I care, without adding a joke to dilute the truth. Secure communication is not about being perfect. It's about letting someone meet you before your fear pushes them away. And, as psychologists explain, vulnerability shared in small, consistent doses rewires attachment patterns far more effectively than grand, emotional declarations. Along the way, you begin rewriting the stories you inherited. The belief that you are hard to love. The belief that closeness always melts into disappointment. You start offering yourself gentler truths. The kind you deserved as a child. I am allowed to be understood. I am allowed to be supported. I am allowed to feel safe. This is where inner child and shadow work intertwine. You close your eyes and see the younger version of yourself, the one who learned to stay quiet, to anticipate pain, to feel invisible. And slowly, patiently, you become the adult they needed. You stop waiting for a partner to heal what life once fractured. Boundaries become your compass. You begin choosing people who respect your depth instead of exploiting it. You walk away from chaos, inconsistency, and hot and cold affection, even when they feel familiar. You understand that real love won't demand that you shrink your mind, only that you soften your fear. You start staying present in the small moments. A hand you hold without pulling away. A confession you share without trembling. A conversation where you speak from your heart rather than your mask. These are not quick hacks. They are a different way of existing in love, one that asks a deeper question. What does it really mean to be both wise and open-hearted? Have you ever wondered why some of the greatest minds in history, the poets, the philosophers, the thinkers who could unravel the mysteries of the universe, stumbled when it came to love? It wasn't because they were unlovable or because they lacked passion. It was because they saw too clearly how fragile everything is. When you understand the impermanence of life, when you feel the weight of possibility and consequence, love becomes more than an emotion. It becomes a risk you can't ignore. You love with your eyes open, knowing how easily hearts bruise, how quickly certainty dissolves, how deeply loss can carve through the soul. But here is the truth that hides beneath all that fear. Being a deep thinker in love isn't a curse. It's a path. A demanding one, yes, a path that forces you to confront the illusions you cling to, the control you try to maintain, the shadows you have carried since childhood, but it also invites you into a version of love that is honest, courageous, and profoundly awake. Because true emotional safety isn't the absence of pain, it's the promise that you will not abandon yourself when pain arrives. It's knowing that even when fear rises like a storm, you won't run from the moment, from the person, or from your own heart. Love, at its core, is not the opposite of fear. Love is the decision to stay present, even when fear is loud. And for someone who thinks as deeply as you do, presence is the bravest act of all. The most courageous thing you can offer another human being isn't perfection or certainty, it's your imperfect, unpolished, unguarded self. The self behind the mask, behind the logic, behind the arguments your mind constructs to protect you. The self that trembles but still reaches out. Your intensity is not a burden. Your awareness is not a flaw. Your sensitivity is not something you need to apologize for. These are the very qualities that, once healed, can create relationships with a depth most people will never experience. Your love is not surface level. It is not casual. It is not careless. It is a love that listens, observes, understands, and feels with a precision that borders on spiritual. And when you allow yourself to trust, even just a little, that love becomes something timeless. One day, you won't stand at the edge of love like a theorist studying a distant star. You will stand inside it not because the danger is gone, but because you finally learn that your mind and your heart were never meant to be enemies. They were meant to walk together, to balance each other, to reveal a kind of love that doesn't punish your depth, but honors it. Deep thinkers don't struggle with love because they are incapable of it. They struggle because no one ever taught them that feeling safe is not the absence of thought, but the moment thought and trust learn to walk side by side.